now this first test question here, what do you guys think? Throw me an answer to this, and there are no bad answers. Right now, it's just about our learning processes. Well, you know, let me point something out to you. Trap number one, FINRA is very good at giving you the beautiful answer to a different question somewhere in ABC, and then burying the very best answer down at the bottom, D. And that's what they've done to us here. I want to point something out to you. The real meat of this question starts with the last sentence, and that's often the case. Sometimes if you have a lengthy question, it just goes on, and it's throwing all kinds of detail at you, and you're thinking what's important and what's not. Start by reading that very last question with the question mark. Once you know where you're going, then you can start at the top and sift down through all that garbage that you don't need and write down the 2 or 3 facts that you do need on a piece of scratch paper. And by the way, scratch paper is your friend, kids. Scratch paper and a pen are your friends. That's a tool. I would get in the habit of diagramming questions as you need. It's often easier to work from your own diagram on your scratch paper than it is staring at that computer screen with a bunch of garbage that you don't need distracting you from the relevant facts. So if we look at this question right here, look at the last sentence. That's the meat of the question. In order to receive the dividend in a cash settled transaction, an investor must purchase the stock no later than. Let's take a deep breath and let's think about what we already know here. Let's talk about trade date and settlement date. Remind yourself what happens on trade date. On trade date, 2 broker-dealers come together and they agree to the terms of the trade. In other words, they agree to trade 500 shares of Google at 103.5, or they agree to trade 100 shares of Facebook at 94 7/8. That's what happens on trade day. The 2 parties come together and they set a time and a price and a quantity, and then they scatter. That's trade day. Now remind yourself what happens on settlement date. On settlement date, the 2 broker-dealers rendezvous, and one hands over cash and the other hands over the securities. That's on settlement date. So on trade date, the terms are set. On settlement date, the terms of the trade are performed. Cash and securities trade hands. Now remind yourself of what you've known your entire life. When you hand over cash for something at that moment and you collect that gizmo, that's when you become the owner of that gizmo, right? Whether it's a Toyota pickup truck or a grapefruit or a municipal bond or shares of stock, whatever. When the cash gets handed over and the securities change hands, that's when the buyer becomes the owner on settlement date. You've known that your entire life. We're just applying simple concepts to the securities world now. So back to this question right here. In order to receive the dividend in a cash settled transaction. Oh, this is a cash settled transaction. So remember what that means. In a cash trade, a trade that settles in cash, trade date equals settlement date, right? Is everybody comfortable with that? Give me a yes or a no. Trade date equals settlement date for a trade that settles in cash. All right, good, everybody. Now look at this test question. Look what the nasty, terrible, smelly, rotten, sadistic test writers did to us. They had us charging down the road thinking, oh, regular way settlement, T+2, I got to find the record date, I got to back it up a business day. And that would have been answer C, wouldn't it? And normally that's the way this question is asked in terms of regular way settlement. Not so on this one. The trick curve here was trade date. So how many times has this already happened to you? you put down a magnificent answer to a different test question, right? Happens to me all the time, even now when I'm tired. So make sure you answer the question that they ask you. Read carefully. And really, this can be summed up in the last sentence. In order to receive the dividend, the investor must purchase in a cash trade. The investor has to buy no later than the record date. And what happens to be the record date? Well, they told us it's Monday the 24th. Wah, wah. Okay, you've seen that trap. You're not going to fall into that next time.